2 Canadian men charged with terrorism in Canada, another Canadian citizen killed with a knife at the Gaza border, and a Canadian follower of terrorist group convicted under Terrorism Act in the UK. This is the Great White North Report. So in the news there was a father-son who were charged with terrorism, and it raised concerns about our immigration system and security screening, which is a big joke when you let in a couple of million people over a 5-year period. Who can screen them all? And this goes all the way back for the last 10 years anyway. So we have two guys here, a father and son, 62-year-old father and a 26-year-old son. I'm not going to say names. They were arrested last month and faced a total of 9 charges. Conspiracy to commit murder for the benefit of the direction of a terrorist group, namely ISIS, a Sunni militant Muslim group. Like, why is it only Muslims that are in groups of terrorists? We don't have Christian terrorists anymore. Turns out these guys were arrested at a hotel. They had an axe and a machete. Yeah, I take an axe and a machete every time I go to a hotel room. I could see if they left in the car and they're going camping. You know, you cut some firewood. Might need a machete to cut through the brush. But you don't. But these guys look like they're from the city, from the sounds of it. Why would you need a machete in the city? Or an axe? They were up to no good. And this is just one of the problems that Islam brings. There's 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. About 25% of them are what they call the radical kind. Actually, they're the far-right conservative kind. They eat, drink, sleep the Quran, the Sunnah, the Tafsir, the Hadiths. They believe all that bullshit. That's the problem. They get easily influenced by Imams and mullahs overseas who are telling them this stuff. Telling them what they want to hear and what... So it's a political ideology. Now, I don't know what this Canadian citizen is doing at the Gaza border. If you're Canadian, you're not near the Gaza border. Simple as that. You're not a real Canadian. Real Canadians was watching hockey, watching the Olympics, playing sports, going out camping on a summer day. Not hanging out at the Gaza border, wielding a knife and threatening Israeli security forces who are going to shoot to kill regardless because you are threatening them. They are under enough pressure as it is. We don't have Jewish people killing Muslims here. No one from Israel is going to show up at the Canadian border with a knife. Give your head a shake. So this idiot, whoever he is, deserves to be killed. I'm sorry, stupidity needs to be rewarded. Then we have another Canadian follower of terrorist group convicted under a terrorist act. Khalid Hussein worked at a gas station in Edmonton. Got arrested as soon as he got off a plane. He was talking to a banned Islamic group. We should be banning more Islamic groups, but then they just go around and change their name. Get a new website. The Islamic Thinker Society, also known as the Al-Muhajiroun. I can't pronounce that. It doesn't matter. So what does all that to do with Canada? I think Canada is at its own peril, allowing so many Muslims into Canada. I'm not saying that all of them are bad people. In fact, I work with some Muslims and they seem pretty nice. Seem like good, nice people. It's when you get a majority of Muslims in here and then you get the Imams, the mullahs, and that old school thinking, that old world thinking back from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, all those Middle Eastern countries. You bring that old stuff here and then it just does it again. They're using jihad, this time through immigration. Immigration jihad, and then it'll be birth jihad, which means they'll have so many kids that they'll soon overpopulate everyone else. And then there's violent jihad. So there's 3 forms of it. And this is according to their own sources. Birth jihad through the womb, immigration like moving in, and then through fighting, battle. It's how Islam was able to spread. You could argue the same thing with Christianity or Buddhism or Hinduism, but so Canadians are being influenced by these idiots overseas, and we also have our own. We have an extremist imam in BC calling for the death, defaming Christians and Jews in strongly condemned language. He attacks us constantly, but we let him in Canada. He says that we are not his friends. We are not friends of Muslims, and he's part of the Muslim Youth League. He doesn't look too youthful, but that's what he calls himself. These are one of the guys that we should put in jail for hate crimes and then kick him out, deport him from the country. Get rid of him. Now, they say, he's causing distress among Canadian Muslims because there are going to be a few that will listen to him. And someone's going to get hurt, and it's going to look bad upon the Muslim population. Plus, we also have the man who led a street full of cheering Montreals in a prayer to kill them all. Again, things we do not need in this country. You leave that shit on the other side of the world. Again, BC officials condemn Imams' call for violence. This one's in Port Coquelin. It's a different guy. Adnan Abiat. This is going to get more and more. This is going to come up to the fore. For some reason, well, I do know some of the reasons, Jews just set them off big time. And it's not a good thing. So what I think Islam needs to reform itself. I'm not saying Islam worldwide, but Canadian Muslims need to reform their religion. They need to disavow the doctrine of taqiyya, which was mainly a Shia thing to hide among Sunni Muslims, but also has taken on other forms where it's perfectly permissible for a Muslim to lie to a non-believer. It is permissible. Supposedly it's to protect themselves, but in Canada, Muslims don't need to protect themselves. They don't need to do taqiyya. But it is, you never know. That's one of the things they could definitely get rid of. But can we trust them to get rid of it? That's the other question. The other is the law of abrogation in Islam. This needs to be refuted. Because the Quran, if you read any one of the Qurans, and there's many of them, there are probably hundreds of different Qurans. There are 30 some odd that can be found in the world. Just do a search. And each of them are different. Some majorly different, others not so much. But the main thing is you'll find if you ever read a Quran is that there are so many contradictions. That one chapter you need to be peaceful, in the next chapter you need to wage war. And there's no story that's continuous. The Quran is done in a way to aid in memorization, which means the first verse, it goes by the longest chapter or longest verse down to the shortest verse. Not in chronological order, which makes it so a confusing mismatch. Just think of the Lord of the Rings if Tolkien had put every chapter, every verse by longest to shortest. How much of the story of the Lord of the Rings would have made sense? Same with the Bible. In Islam, it's perfectly acceptable to put things longest to shortest. It aids in memorization, though it doesn't make the story any clearer. The Quran is not clear, even though they claim it's clear. It's not clear, and they need what they call a tafsir, which is commentaries on the Quran to make sense of it. And there's so many of them, that genre. They don't even know. So the law of abrogation is that an earlier, when there's two verses that contradict each other, the later verse is the one you go with. The earlier verses are then abrogated in favor of the later verse. Now you can separate this through what's called the Meccan and Medina verses, which has really nothing to do with anything, but the Meccan verses are supposedly the earliest verses when Muhammad, the supposed prophet Muhammad, didn't have any followers, or not many followers. So they were peaceful with everyone. But once he got more power, the more power he got, the more he started being warlike and bossy and just being a plain asshole, in simple terms. And then that's when he was in Medina, and the Medina verses are the more violent passages. So those verses cancel out the earlier verses. It's a contradiction in terms. It's something that Muslims got around by having the doctrine of abrogation. A cancel culture in not a good way. The earliest verses in the Quran accepted Christianity and Judaism. The original direction of prayer was towards Jerusalem and the command of Muslims to allow freedom of worship for all. These three practices were later abrogated or cancelled out. It was during the Abbasid period where the direction of prayer changed from Jerusalem down to Mecca. The Abbasids were, by the way, Persians. They were doing it as a political thing. Because the Umayyads were the ones who had the direction of prayer to either Jerusalem or Petra. There's a debate on that one. Dr. Dan Gibson, he's been to over 100 of the mosques, of the earliest mosques, and he's gone through a schematic of where the Qibla, the direction of prayer, is. Like I said, Judaism and Christianity is once accepted by Muslims, and Muslim extremists will use that to prove that, hey, we were peaceful. But no, they're not. And we'll get to that in a minute. Freedom of worship for all was originally commanded. There is no compulsion in religion. Surah 2:256. That's been abrogated. In Muhammad's later career, he said the opposite. So when the sacred months have passed, then slay the idolaters wherever you find them. Take them captives, besiege them, and lie in wait for them in every ambush. Then if they repent and keep up prayer and pay the poor rate, leave their way free to them. Surely Allah is forgiving. But Surah 9 said, O Prophet, strive hard against the unbelievers and the hypocrites and be unwielding to them, and their abode is hell and the evilest destination. Surah 9:73. There's so many examples like that. And there it is, Surah 9:5. Kill the polytheists whenever you find them and capture them. Now this is a different version. But then when you go to Mushin Khan, it says something else. Kill the mushkin, which is the idolaters, wherever you find them. Capture them, besiege them, prepare them for them each and every ambush. But if they repent and perform as salat, give zakat, which is the poor tax, basically tribute, then leave their way free. Alright? Whichever way you look at it, it says slay. Unless they convert. And kill them whenever, Surah 2 and 191, kill them whenever you overtake them and expel them from wherever they have expelled. And fitna is worse than killing. Do not fight them at the Al-Masjid al-Haram until they fight you there. But if they fight you, then kill them, such as the recompensance of the disbelievers. There's different versions of the same verse. Fighting for the cause of Allah, jihad. The hour will not be established until you fight with the Jews and the stone behind which the Jew is hiding. Oh, a Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, so kill him. These are just examples of what is in the Quran and the Hadiths and the Sunnahs and the Tafsirs and everything else. This is why Islam needs a total reformation. Get rid of the Medina verses and go back to the Meccan verses. Which will be hard because the Meccan verses sound a lot like Christianity and Judaism. There's a lot of Christian influences in Islam. Especially the early Islam. All you have to do is go look at the Birmingham Folios. They have 3 chapters and they talk about Moses. They're basically just Christian stories. But unless we want to see more of this, we need either to stop Islamic immigration from Islamic countries. Because let's face it, Islam is not a friend of the LGBTQ plus whatever the hell it is. They're not friends of that. They're not friends with Jews. They're very anti-Semitic. They're very anti-Western, for the most part. The most peaceful verse in the Quran actually is a direct attack on Christianity, which is how Islam started. It started as an attack on the divinity of Jesus. They are not Trinitarians. They were Unitarians. But again, if we need to stop Muslim immigration to Canada, simply because we're going to get more of this shit, and it's going to get worse. What we've seen over the past 10 months is about the tip of the iceberg in the long run. Muslims in Canada need to reform their religion, need to get rid of, streamline the Qurans, pick a different Quran, maybe, I don't know, go back to rewrite the Quran. It's been done before. You can't find a Quran from the 7th century. Most of the Qurans were written sometime in the late 8th to the 10th century. Definitely during the time of the Umayyads and the Abbasids. So I think it's a call for Canadians to wake up and realize that, hey, we need to do something. And Muslims in Canada, if they're really peaceful and they want to stay here peacefully, without any problems, they should start looking at what's wrong with their religion. Why is it so sick that you have things like this? Can't blame the Jews for all your problems. So I'm going to go out and call for a reformation of Islam within Canada. Time to kick out the mullahs and the imams that are here, that are old school. And it's time for the government to train imams and mullahs in what should be acceptable to teach in Islam. Because most Muslims don't really know what their religion commands them to do. They do the basics. But if they do a deep dive, then they'll realize just what an embarrassment it can be. But those are my thoughts. Any Canadians out there, let me know what you guys think. Why is this going to be? Do you think this is going to be a problem in the future? And what can we do to solve the problem? Leave comments in the comment section. Until next time, this has been the Great White North Report.